Subscribe now and press the bell icon. Never miss an update.
Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Martin Infante. I'm from the Philippines, and I was born and raised there, and I'm carrying a Philippine passport. I say this because I'm also the current president of the Asian Federation of Therapeutic Communities in Asia, and people have always asked me, you don't look Asian. I look foreign. Okay, so I was born and raised in the Philippines, and I hope that sets up my credentials to share with you part of my life and mostly the work that I do. I am in recovery now for 31 years. Thank you. I have spent 23 years doing drugs in my life. And so in this mission, as many probably can relate, I have learned to lead people, drug users and whatever, away from drugs and into recovery. And that became my innate and first mission, which I've done for 31 years. In the last years, however, I have inherited another mission, which is now to lead rehab TC practitioners to let go of some old school TC practices, which I'm going to talk about, and encourage them to see and explore the practices we're talking about nowadays and evolve with the world, no? And run highly ethical and humane approaches. Okay, I'll try to explain that. I have another challenge in being the president of Asia Therapeutic Community. There's so many languages in Asia. There's so many countries, so many languages, dialects. There are at least 4 religions, which makes for also a multitude of cultures, ways that people do things differently in every country. And I will say it's been at least just a big challenge. No? But as I stand here today, this is my first time in India. Thank you for welcoming me to India. And I only know actually one center in India I work with. His name is Ranjan Dar. I don't know if he's in the room. And beyond that, I would like to invite more people to come and explore the Federation and learn more about the work we do, and I'd really look forward to working with many of you. No? When I presented the FTCA report yesterday, we unfortunately had to only present it to mostly the foreign group that was present. Now, I'm really very humbled, but really happy to see all the other participants of this conference in this room, and I'll do my best and explain what I'm going to do. When I said there are so many cultures in Asia, I think by now you'll learn to agree, and quoting many other of my mentors who said, but there's only one culture that's going to heal us, from the drug dependency, and that's the TC culture. That's what we're trying to promote. Okay? I will not be introducing my program, as I have a lot of slides that really I will be delving into, I don't want to call it, into the mechanics of the program, and I have lined up actually 5 essential elements. I've dedicated my whole life into recovery, so I've been in the treatment center for 31 years. And as we grew, we also made a lot of mistakes. That has to be said, and I'm ready to share them all with you in my paper. And along the way, we realized that we had to make some changes. So I made it my second mission to try to share and invite people. You'll be hearing a lot of my saying old school, so I'm just going to call old school as the practices of the olden TC. No? The TC has gained wide acceptance in Asia over the last 4 decades. This is not surprising, and this is based on family and community and imbued with a spiritual dimension that speaks to the core of the Asian identity. Unfortunately, there's been a lack of training on the TC approach in the Asian region in the recent years. Still, many rehabs are continuing to adopt the approach without a proper understanding of its methods and practices. Just as a quick background, I don't know if you know this, but the first therapeutic community program in Asia landed and was founded in the Philippines in the 1970s, in the early 1970s. I won't mention anymore the institution. And what I know, as I did my research, is the founder himself of that program fled and left them alone after a few years. So the DATAP was, the program was a DATAP-inspired program, but in all fairness, we don't know how much of the program was really absorbed. So in the following decades, other rehabs in the Philippines started employing the TC approach that was inherited from that pioneer TC program, as it was the same program approach that made it across the waters to our Asian neighbors. So in fact, we in the Philippines, we feel, well, sad or guilty that we have actually exported this. I think first stop was Malaysia, and then to Thailand, Indonesia, so on and so forth. I don't know if it got to India in that way. Even as there was a lack of formal training on the TC approach, the old school TC continued to be the program of choice for most rehab operators. Many operators like to call their program a TC, never mind what methods and practices they actually employed. I heard this saying before. It was like putting a saddle on a donkey and calling it a horse. Hence rose many organizations that ran their program without having a proper understanding of the rationale of its methods and practices. Not surprisingly, the TC approach developed a questionable reputation over time, and some critics have even deemed it to be an abusive and inhumane form of treatment, which it's not. Properly run. What people disliked about the old school TC, it was highly coercive and rigid. It became known as a center where residents are always shouting at each other when being confronted or during therapy groups, like the encounter group. Even more problematic was the infamous haircut, where residents eventually were trained to blast. I will use the word blast as the excessive form of raising your voice, because eventually I'm going to be talking about that during sanctions, that I still do believe in raising your voice. We raise our voice in our family, communities. You need to raise your voice, but to blast the way it came out, and I don't know if some of you can relate to that, is taboo, okay? It was rationalized as a need for discipline. Those methods remained at the core of the programs and were the very methods that were passed on to other programs for decades to come. Sadly, some centers still employ this same old approach today. And I know this, at least in my country, just this year, as the COVID started to wane, we engaged in a lot of government center agency training in our facility, in our training center. Over 50 people I trained just this year. And I was shocked to find out how many of them were still into the old school practices. 2022. And naturally they were hungry to find out what is this. And as I was teaching them, and as I was showing them videos of George de Leon talking about community as method, they were shocked. And one fellow, he cried. He says, I've been in this, working as a rehab practitioner for 10 years now, and nobody taught me this. When was that recording of George de Leon? Oh, I said, that's an old one. That's like 70s, 80s at tops. You mean in 1980s they're running TCs that way already? I said, that's the real TC. We unfortunately got lost somewhere in Asia. Old school TCs were run mostly by graduates of the program at the time. Their philosophy was you needed to be an addict to understand addiction. There was a fear that professionals would transform the program into a multidisciplinary approach and lose its original essence. What was our experience? My organization is called SELF, by the way. So we established our organization in 1992. We were similarly situated. Our grasp of the TC approach was largely confined to the methods and practices that we inherited. We lacked in-depth knowledge and understanding of the principles that govern the TC. In the mid-90s, DataUp International provided some formal training, but this only lasted a few years before it was discontinued. In 2000, after I was able to situate ourselves in a permanent home, because I spent a whole decade looking for a permanent home. We didn't start in a big place, we started in a humble home, and we had a fire, and that destroyed our home. I had to look for a temporary home, and finally, in 2000, I was able. So, starting that year, we immediately engaged in a thorough review of our TC program, and by the time we were done with our audit, we threw away most of the old school practices and established new ones. Through our collaboration with world TC operators, we gained a better understanding of the TC's theoretical framework. In 2015, we subjected our program to an external audit by a freelance consultant and received validation for our efforts. Basically, over the last 20 years, we have reinvented the TC that we used to run into a more viable and accountable approach, better fitted for the Asian region. The following are 5 essential elements of that model. Please know that I'm humbly presenting to you, this is just my work, and this is just a contemporary model as per my own research and experience, so I'm not saying that this has to be it. No? So I'm going to go through, so these are the 5 key features. No? Progressive organizational core values. I'll go through that with a couple of slides. A well-defined program structure. Transparent manual of operations. Dynamic TC system of sanctions. And very importantly, least but not the least, because I really want to spend time on this, because it's very true to the Asian culture, the family empowerment program. First is the belief system. We must believe in the innate goodness of mankind. Every man and woman is created under the image likeness of God. When confronting residents, it is important that we tell them that we are detesting the attitude and never the person. Second is this new TC culture. With a new model emerged, a new motto also emerged. We are a strict yet caring environment. While remaining strict, we took care not to be abusive, and even as we are caring, we guarded ourselves against being enabling. Third are the implementing guidelines. We also believe that all persons will eventually reintegrate, first with the self, then with others, and then with God. And how does one measure when our resident is doing this? Try to analyze it. How do you measure your attainment of relationship with others? And the answer to that is also with others. And how do you measure your attainment of your spirituality? And that can't be a hotline to the higher power. Again, it's the others. The others, which is the community. So it brings us back to the community. Okay. We have developed 3 implementing guidelines. We uphold 3 governing principles. Henceforth, all methods and practices would have to pass the test of being respectful, logical, and practical. Before we get to that, respectful, we learned that concerns, whether in confrontation or haircut, need not be carried out with blasting. We instead drew up guidelines that teach participants how to give helpful concerns, even if it had to be said out loud, and keep it respectful. Number 2 is logical. We made sure that all practices had a clear objective in the therapeutic process and were backed up by a theoretical framework. Gone are the days we simply rationalized what we were doing. Then we come to practical. All methods and practices have had to a clear way of promoting change and teaching residents how to stay away from drugs. If it doesn't have any clear way, we throw it out the window. So we move into the second feature, which is well-defined program structure. I ended up calling it a dual approach, TC or whatever. On the one hand, we kept the behavior modification aspect or thrust of the TC process, which addresses dependency through behavior modification, using the TC tools of the house, and so on. On the other hand, we integrated clinical interventions into the picture, which include psychiatric management, case management, motivational interviewing, cognitive behavior therapy, family intervention groups, and the family empowerment program, to name a few. Graduates of the program are still involved in our program, so we allow them to head programs. However, with the able assistance of trained professionals. No? Through manualized protocols, programmers are facilitated in working hand in hand with the clinical team, which is usually composed of psychiatrists, social workers, psychologists, and nurses. This transdisciplinary team, okay, there you have the dual approach. These are our phases. We're operating a 3-stage program, which we call treatment, different from rehabilitation, and different from continuing care. This transdisciplinary team makes up the committee that reviews resident achievements and incidents and decides the appropriate reward or sanctions through weekly meetings called the Transdisciplinary Committee, or as you'll see in the slide soon, TDCOM, thus keeping on point with the TC ethos of community as method. One of the main changes we did to our program from the old school is we created an induction phase, recognizing that we have 3 stages of development. The induction phase would be at the first corner of treatment. In the treatment stage, one of the most welcome changes we made was the induction phase, which we at SELF call evaluation and motivation unit. That was just our own terminology. Unlike in the old school program where clients were made to go straight to the prospect chair upon arrival, now clients admitted to the center are first housed in an induction phase for a period of time where they are screened to determine their physical, mental health, and general fitness to join the program. They are also given a thorough orientation to the TC approach and motivated to join the program voluntarily. You know, in the old school, there was this statement that was taught to me, you know, you're in the need-to-know basis. First thing and the only thing you got to learn is blind obedience. And now we're in the totally opposite pole. The moment they're in induction, we're giving information. And a lot of people attacked me about this, both staff and graduates as well. They said, hey, it worked with me. You're getting soft doing this kind of a program. But guess what? It works. Information works, and all of this else works. Gradual checkpoints. Towards having a well-defined program, we have established behavior indicators that support resident appraisal and gradual stages of development. In our organization, we dub this the 7 checkpoints to the road of recovery. Through these milestones, we are able to keep properly measure clients' achievement and facilitate them more accurately in the forthcoming stages. Our end in mind is really not just simply abstinence, but personal integrity. And so we also do believe in the lengthier type of TC program. We believe that a published manual of operations should be available and where every resident or staff can read, so that anything that can be done is written and anything that has been done is documented. But this, by the way, is our way of doing an internal audit where we get everybody together in the community to bring up issues. We do this every 2 years. Residents in good standing, they come up and we have made major changes. Next slide, please. And that's the way they choose which committee they want to join. And we have workshops at pretty much like a small convention. Okay, let's talk about dynamic system of TC sanctions. Okay, everybody familiar with the hierarchy of behavior shaping tools of the TC, the infamous triangle. No? We have managed to marry the models with the model I learned from Stephen Covey, of highly effective people. The emotional bank account allows now the residents, so we're following the EMO Bank table. You have your kindness and courtesies, meeting expectations, keeping promises, avoiding duplicity, making apologies. So we found out that by applying the EMO Bank account in red, sometimes high severity incidents are now can yield a more moderate behavior shaping tool. Okay, the expression of anger must be done appropriately. Blasting is not allowed. Learning experiences must be related to the lapse. Gone are the days of cutting grass with a nail cutter or cleaning the floor with a toothbrush. And don't craft an LE that the staff can't do. That's my motto in our facility. This is your Transdisciplinary Committee, where, as per George de Leon, present in that committee must be residents, junior residents in good standing, where they are taught about the culture, they're trained on how to think like the staff, and then finally, for me and most importantly, these junior residents, they learn that I thought people are just deciding on a whim, and they find out that it takes minutes, sometimes an hour, to decide the course of a single resident. And last but not least is the Family Empowerment Program. It's a support system that seeks to educate families on the realities of dysfunctional codependency. It's about getting families to go into their own recovery from codependency. The hallmark of this program is that we work so closely with the families that we teach them about the TC every month. We run a parallel program with Family Empowerment Program. And we make, sometimes when we have serious decisions to make on the resident, we won't do it without the families signing on to our decision. So that's the way we work with them. And I'll go in closing. So in closing, the TC is very much alive in the Philippines and in Asia. With formal training, we can keep the spirit of this great program vibrant, and I'll say thank you very much.